Guardiola has a new formation at Man City, the 2-3-5. But why has Pep been using this for the past few weeks? What are its strengths, its weaknesses? Through the lens of the Everton game and my tactical board, and stills from the game, I'll be analysing the Everton game itself, as well as this new formation. And let's start, shall we, not with the Everton game, but actually with how we set up against Newcastle. This was the first game where I noticed this new 2-3-5 shape. You can quite clearly see there that you've got Diaz and Ake as the back two, and you have Rodri, Bernardo and Kovacic as the midfield three. The wingers, the wing backs in this case, were actually the two full backs, Guardiola playing as the left winger, Kyle Walker as the right winger. Why would you want to do this? In the first instance, we need to think about what is Man City's biggest weakness: the transition, the counter-attack. Minimising counter-attacks, for the most part, will mean that Man City will win the game, because that's the best way to get at Man City, through a counter-attack. What this does, by pushing Guardiola so far up the left and Walker so far up the right, notice how deep Anthony Gordon is there and how deep Almiron is there, because they are having to push that deep due to the gravity and the existence of both Walker and Guardiola. They've got to come back, otherwise they would be open in space and City would be able to cut through them really easily. So it's pushing back the opposition players. That means even if they do win the ball back, their starting position is a lot deeper, therefore it's going to be harder for them to launch relevant counterattacks against Man City. And if we visualise this in the tactics board, if we're to pretend that Walker and Guardiola were there, Guardiola up there, Walker up there, as I say, McNeil, Gordon, whoever it is, it forces them back and it makes them join the defensive units rather than a potential counter-attacking one. So that was the Newcastle game, and it was similar against Everton. So there's the back two of Ake Diaz, and actually the way we created this 2-3 shape wasn't with the use of the full-backs becoming wing-backs, it was the full-backs becoming inverted midfielders. So both Akanji, who played at left-back to start, and Stones, who played at right-back to start, partnered Rodri in the middle. Foden and Doku were the wingers, the wing-backs in this case. Another strength of doing this is it gets more out of one of our worst players this season, Kyle Walker. I've been a massive critic of Kyle Walker this season, rightly so. He's been awful for the most part. However, recently, since this formation shift, which we've witnessed in the Newcastle game, the Spurs game, the Brentford game, he has been really good, genuinely one of the better players on the pitch, because it minimises his build-up burden and just allows him to arrive into those positions where he has to think less, and he's just like, right, I've arrived into the attacking position rather than having to get there myself or help others get there. All I've got to do is arrive into these positions and put in a final ball. So against Newcastle, really good work by Doku in the build-up. Walker is totally isolated on his own. He's able to deliver a threatening cross into the box. Bernardo, it's a wonder goal, sure, but nevertheless Walker does get the assist, and that all comes from the fact that he's able to arrive into this right wing position rather than have to build up to that position. The weakness of the system. We saw it against Newcastle, we saw it against Everton. Doku gives away the ball here. With one pass, Everton are in, because there is zero protection out wide, because our fullbacks are now wingers or wing-backs. That is the main issue with the system. One ball through, one further ball through, Isak is in. Ortega, it's a really good save. Similar thing with Everton. Akanji gives away the ball here. If Calvert-Lewin makes a better decision, he would be able to exploit that wide area, and potentially Everton would have a really dangerous counter-attack. So this formation is a double-edged sword. In the one instance, it limits the amount of counter-attacks. However, it probably increases the quality of those counter-attacks. So whilst there are less counter-attacks, if we suffer a counter-attack in this formation, it's more likely to lead to a goal. But against Everton, this 2-3 shape didn't work for most of the game. The first half, we were totally abysmal. Defensively, very strong, which I will get into later in the video. But going forwards, creatively, nothing. Zero shots on target. Really bad, sort of like first 50 minutes for Man City. The main reason for that, I'm sorry to say it, the two main offenders were Alvarez and Nunes. Not necessarily their fault. These are players who thrive more so, Nunes especially, who thrive more so in big spaces. These are not pocket players. Everton were never going to give us any space. Very compact, very narrow, Sean Dyche Everton side. What we needed here was a Foden, a Bob, a Bernardo, really good players who can play in those pockets, who've got a fantastic first touch, where you can utilise the Foden fizz, which we've touched on before on this channel. As it was, neither of them had a good game. Nunes had some decent rotations with Foden, but outside of that, he was very bad. As the game went on, we saw City move away from the 2-3 shape back to the more traditional 3-2 shape. Akanji played the John Stones role. John Stones played not the John Stones role. Don't really know what the thinking was there. Maybe just to give Akanji more experience there, because Stones is a bit injury prone, can't really rely on him. But it was good from a Stones perspective, because having him at right back, right centre half did mean we were able to move the ball up really well on the right-hand side, given how good Stones' playmaking ability is. So here is an example in around the 30th minute. Stones, lovely ball through to Foden. Foden always wants to cut inside when he's playing out wide, because he's a midfielder playing out wide. And this is what I was talking about before, a nice connection between Foden and Matheus Nunes. Fizzes that ball to Nunes. Nunes should probably do better with that ball, but that was one example of maybe why we wanted Stones at right centre-half rather than in the Stones role. But overall, City struggled against Everton, couldn't break them down. Everton were really good defensively, really resilient. I thought Branthwaite and Tarkowski in particular were exceptional. They were both really good on one hand, but then on the other hand, I thought Guardiola really made it hard on himself and on City with that starting 11 selection. I don't really know what he was thinking there, picking players who can't play in the pockets. It all changed after this conversation. Guardiola is instructing Foden, you go in the middle, Nunes is going to go on the right, and then ultimately Nunes was replaced by Kyle Walker. Foden then passes on the message to Nunes here, and immediately, you can see there, Nunes goes out to the right, Foden more so in the middle. As soon as Foden goes into the middle, things happen. Rodri, Foden fizz into Phil Foden. Lovely first touch, forces a cynical foul by Everton, otherwise Foden would have been able to play Alvarez in, draws the yellow card. This substitution changed the game in City's favour. Obviously, Kevin coming on, our best player, whatever. Genuinely, Kyle Walker was the main reason why we won that game. I'm going to give him some flowers in this tactical analysis, because he's the reason why we won. Let me explain why. Nunes came off, De Bruyne came on, Akanji came off, Walker came on. The system changed, the formation changed again. Let me show you what it changed to. Rodri at the base, Foden at right central midfield, Alvarez at the tip, KDB left central midfield, Walker right wing. What happened was a system which we've only seen twice this season, against Leipzig in the Champions League and against Burnley recently. The diamond made a return. This was slightly different though, because whilst it was the diamond we've seen a couple times before, there was key emphasis and focus on the arrivals of Kyle Walker, not having to be burdened with the build-up responsibility, which we've seen in previous games, which, as we've established, he cannot do. More so on the 2-3 winger, wing-back play. Getting into those positions, those final arrivals, and putting in dangerous low crosses without having to think too much about intricate passing. In case you don't believe me, here is an example of said diamond. Rodri at the base, De Bruyne on the left, Alvarez at the tip, Foden at the right. So basically 3-8-10s, if you will. I still have my doubts on whether Alvarez should be included in that midfield. In fact, I don't have doubts. He shouldn't be included in that midfield, but he was, and that was the state of play. But the main thing, as I say, was the fact that Kyle Walker was now able to play as that final phase wing-back, almost, if you will. Here's one example of it. So this is basically as soon as he's come on, 60th minute, Stones plays it into Walker. Walker doesn't have to do anything other than fire across into there. Doesn't actually lead to anything, but the warning signs were there from an Everton standpoint. City were more in this game now. We had a shape which actually benefited the players on the pitch, and the players on the pitch were able to play better in those constrained circumstances that Everton put City into. This is the phase of play which leads to the goal. Walker being out wide doesn't directly create the goal, but the circumstances around it did change the impetus of the game and ultimately did lead to the goal. De Bruyne played a lovely ball through to Foden here. Foden drives forward, and once again, Walker doesn't have to beat anyone. He doesn't have to do anything other than arrive into this position and fire across, trying to pick out Haaland, Alvarez, whoever. Everton defend it well. It leads to a corner. From said corner, we win another corner, and we're able to score through Erling Haaland. You might say I'm reaching there, but genuinely, I don't think we win this game unless Walker comes on. Even if we don't score from that corner, we just played so much more fluidly when that happened, because Walker coming on allowed Foden to play in the middle. It allowed Walker to be that danger man out wide. So that's the 2-3 shape. It has its strengths, it has its weaknesses. The main strength is the fact that it pins the opposition back. It means that someone who's more offensively limited, like Walker, he can still contribute offensively. Obviously, the weaknesses defensively are that you are left more exposed. But speaking on defence, this was the first time we've seen this back four start a game for City since Inter Milan, since the Champions League final. I don't think it's a coincidence we looked so defensively solid when Stones and Akanji came onto the pitch. In my ideal starting 11, they both start. Ultimately, we settled on deciding to win the game, finally, just by getting Foden in the middle, getting Walker into those positions. And when you've got a player like Erling Haaland, who is a game breaker, who is a game winner in his own right, it's very hard to keep him quiet for 90 minutes. I personally don't like the 2-3 shape. I think that Pep's only doing it because we don't have that many true wingers at the club. I really don't like the defensive frailties it introduces. However, I can see the value of it where we don't have too many direct and true wingers at the club, and where we really want to emphasise pinning the opposition back, especially in a situation like Newcastle, where you've got really pacey offensive players like Isak and Gordon. Not my preference, but I can see why we're doing it. That's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Apologies for the lack of uploads. I've been ill, to be honest, so apologies for that. I'm feeling a little bit better now, so more consistent uploads from now on. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and like for more. I'll catch you guys next time.